Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys and offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Business First Bank, with locations throughout the state, including 11 offices in the Baton Rouge area, providing personal and commercial banking, treasury management, and wealth solution services to help clients succeed. Business First Bank, banking with greater momentum. And by Shewart & Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas.
From Mansurs on the Boulevard in Baton Rouge, we're out to lunch with the editor of the Baton Rouge Business Report, Stephanie Riegel. It's business, Baton Rouge style.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Riegel. Welcome to Out to Lunch. Quality education is a challenge in this country today. It seems like many of our schools are losing ground as public funding for education is being cut. At the same time, there's a greater emphasis on alternatives to traditional school systems and an increased interest in all things that help us think outside the box. Joining me today is Ashley Hurd, who spent a lot of time thinking about non-traditional education and the charter school system. Her firm, Ashley Hurd Consulting, specializes in helping nonprofit organizations that provide educational services like charter schools with fundraising, business development, and strategic planning. Ashley's clients include the Emerge Center for Autism, Greater Baton Rouge HOPE Academy, and the Southern University Alumni Association. Ashley became interested in helping educational organizations when, right out of college, she joined Teach for America as a special ed teacher in Washington, D.C. She went on to law school in Chicago, where she worked with the Chicago Public Schools and the Illinois Network of Charter Schools. She came to Baton Rouge in 2014 to work with a then new charter organization, New Schools for Baton Rouge, which targets primarily North Baton Rouge. In 2016, she branched out on her own to help education and social service nonprofits throughout the state. Ashley, it's a pleasure to have you. Thanks for joining me on Out to Lunch. With me and Ashley at the table is Missy Couhig, owner of the Conundrum, an independent bookstore in the heart of St. Francisville that has become something of an intellectual and literary hub in the charming town. The Conundrum not only sells books, but has become a meeting place for the community, hosting local and traveling authors, story times for smaller book lovers, and book festivals. Missy is a book lover herself who this year is chairing the Walker Percy Festival weekend, the Writers and Readers Symposium, and the West Feliciana Children's Book Festival. Missy is also active on the Chamber of Commerce and the Parish Tourist Commission, so it might surprise you to know she's a relative newcomer to St. Francisville who didn't move there until after Hurricane Katrina. Missy, you're doing so much great things there and serving as sort of an educational alternative yourself, so welcome to Out to Lunch.
Well, thank you. I'm so pleased to be here.
Ashley, I want to start with you. You worked for Teach for America. You helped run New Schools for Baton Rouge. Now you're helping to raise money for charter schools. Does charter education work? And is it doing a better job of educating our kids?
Sure. I believe so. I mean, that's why I'm in this work. And I would say that the choice movement is important for kids and families, right? So every child is different. Every family wants something different for their children. And so it's our job as adults to give those families the choices that they need. So whether those schools are charter, traditional, public, private, I believe in the power of choice and in families' ability to choose what's right for their children.
What is it about charter schools that makes them so attractive? Why is a charter school better in theory than a public school?
Sure. Well, I'll mention first that charters are public schools, right?
Right. And a traditional public school.
Exactly. And I think what makes them unique is that they're autonomous. So while traditional public schools are often beholden to a larger district and to a much broader
bureaucracy.
Exactly. Sometimes, right? And I have the utmost respect for traditional schools. But with charters, you have a little bit more autonomy and flexibility to move faster. So in our charter schools, we have schools that serve a variety of students with a variety of needs, using a variety of models, and they're able to do that flexibly based upon the students that come in their door.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are you doing at Ashley Hurd Consulting? How critical is the need to raise money for these organizations?
Sure. So what I found exciting about the work that I get to do is, there are lots of nonprofits who are doing excellent work in Baton Rouge and are operating on a shoestring budget. And so they often fall into a trap, right? They don't have the money to run the programs that they want to the degree that they want, and yet they can't hire someone to do the fundraising that they need. And so it really becomes a game of chicken or egg. And so at Ashley Hurd Consulting, we're able to come in with a flexible approach that meets the needs of the organization, including including the budget that they have, and help them raise the dollars they need, either for individual programming that they want to add on to their existing model or for ongoing operations.
And fundraising is such a huge thing
Absolutely.
right now. We want to visit some more about that. But Missy, I wanted to talk to you because you're sort of almost on the enrichment end, right? And
Yes.
you're not directly in education, but with a small retail business that helps people think, offering them rich events like book festivals and author events. You said you always dreamed of opening a bookstore, as a retirement job or a second career.
Right.
You're too young to retire, but has it lived up to the dream?
Absolutely. I can't imagine doing anything else. I lived my entire career in corporate America, you might call it, but in sales. So I was an insurance agent. I was a marketing rep for insurance companies. I went into pharmaceutical sales where I was a pharmaceutical representative, and then I was a manager for a pharmaceutical company, and I'm always traveling around just a million miles an hour.
Sure.
But I always had a book in my lap when I was doing it. And so now I'm in the bookstore where literally I get to spend the entire day, and I thought that would drive me crazy. I thought the thought of sitting in one place
Right.
would be the end of me. I cannot tell you, it is my happy place. It's a wonderful thing. People come in and they want to talk about books all day. They want to tell you about the book that changed their lives, or the book that made them a reader, or the book that convinced their 6-year-old child to pick up a book and learn to love to read. It's an amazing opportunity.
How does a small bookstore compete today against an Amazon or, the ebook world?
Well,
Is it a viable business model?
I think you'll get different answers on different days when you ask that question to people. But the real answer is that people crave connectedness in this world. And yes, you can buy a book on Amazon. Yes, you can download a book anywhere or, have something mailed to you. But can you go in and ask someone, someone came in yesterday, for instance, and they're on their way on a trip. And they want to know, I'm going on this trip, I need something that I can read in the airport. Have you read these 3 books? Mm-hmm. And I'm able to tell them something about each one of the books so that they said, okay, this is the one. You can't do that with a website. You might say, what are the top 10 books, currently selling, but that doesn't tell you what you enjoy. So this way we're able to talk and have an actual communication and connection between people.
That's so wonderful. Who's buying books? I mean, do you get young people in there, or is it mostly older people?
Oh, absolutely young people. Our biggest sellers are children's books. Children, I think one of the best things that's happened in education recently is the AR reader points. So children are incentivized to read by getting points that get them prizes and help with different things in their schooling. And so they want to read and they want to hit that next level and come in and, talk about, and they're into series now, all the young kids. They're into all these series. So, you have to know the different series, but children are big readers. Of course, people our age and adults as well, but children, I would say, are the real focus in a bookstore.
And the attention span issue, you haven't felt that?
No.
Because our attention spans are all getting so much shorter, which is such a shame.
They are, but an amazing thing when you pick up a book is all of the world goes away, and you can get lost in it, and you're no longer wondering. Slow down a minute and read that book and turn the page, and you're not thinking, oh my gosh, I wonder what's trending currently. You're thinking, I wonder what's on the next page.
We need to get away from that. Well, speaking of the world being too much with us, Ashley, nonprofits face so many challenges. What is the greatest need that they have? I mean, do they just money? Do they just not know how to access it? And how do you all do what you do?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think for a lot of nonprofits that are local to Baton Rouge, it's really a twofold question, right? So one is obviously a funding need. Our community is small. I would say our community is very giving. So I've been really impressed and excited by the philanthropic community in Baton Rouge and the opportunity to get to work with them. I would say for the folks that I work with who are working on fundraising, it's a twofold question. One, they don't always have the capacity internally to raise money. Development directors who are good at their job are expensive, and so it becomes a question of, well, then how do you?
So if you're a little nonprofit that can't hire
your own person. If you're a small nonprofit who can't handle a full-time salary and benefits of a strong development director, what do you do? And so I'm really hoping that Ashley Hurd Consulting fits that niche. We're able to come in and offer what would otherwise be part-time services, but what I hope is in a really high-quality way. So we're able to toggle back and forth with an individual organization's needs, meet them where they're at, and also help build capacity internally for them to take some of that work ongoing should they decide to move on with us or to move on their own. So I think that's an exciting
you all also
opportunity.
do strategic planning and business plans, which is such a critical need for these organizations.
Sure. So a good example of that actually is with an organization near and dear to my heart called Brothers Empowered to Teach. And this is an organization out of New Orleans. They expanded to Baton Rouge last year. And Brothers Empowered to Teach places young men and women of color from local universities in our schools as tutors. They pay them to tutor students, and they work 15 hours a week. The idea behind Brothers Empowered to Teach is we need more teachers of color working in our schools. Our students need to see themselves represented in their educators. And so this is an opportunity for young people in our community at the college level to get involved in our schools and then hopefully become teachers later on. So Brothers Empowered to Teach, when they came to expand to Baton Rouge, I did some work with them to help them understand their organizational strengths and some places where they might think to expand.
How has your law degree helped with this endeavor of yours?
Excellent. It's funny, I don't actually practice, and so it's interesting that I actually have a law degree, but it's been instrumental. It helps me with my communication strategy. It helps me think in a very different way. The way that I work with people changes, and I think that's something that I learned from law school, or at least honed in my law school experience. My writing and my oral communication, I think, is a lot tighter as a result of the difficulty of law school. So I'm very grateful that I went to law school and that I was able to have that experience.
I'm Stephanie Riegel. You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm talking to Ashley Hurd of Ashley Hurd Consulting and Missy Couhig of the Conundrum. Missy, your background in corporate America, did it prepare you for the life of the small town country retailer?
It did in a way. St. Francisville is an interesting community. It is a small town, but it is such an incredibly creative town that even though we're so small, we have, like you mentioned earlier, all of these book festivals that draw people from, last year I believe the Walker Percy weekend, we had people travel in from 21 states and 2 countries to come attend the event.
And that's a huge deal.
That is a huge deal. And it raises money for a fabulous foundation. But it has made me comfortable enough to get up in front of that crowd, standing there with best-selling authors and academics from, all around the best universities in the country, and to feel like I can stand up next to them and introduce them at this event. And I don't think, if I didn't have that background, I would be so comfortable doing that or this, for that matter.
That's great. And so tell me a little more about the festivals and the author events. And so it really helps put St. Francisville on the map and your store, but it creates an intellectual literary community.
It does. Well, St. Francisville, like I said, is this incredibly creative community where we have living in that community best-selling authors and wonderful artists that were there long before I ever was there. And it's just an interesting mix, and they're so supportive of the arts. And so it's a natural phenomenon that we should have these events there. I can't take credit for them. I was an attendee the first year I went to the Walker Percy weekend, and I love Walker Percy's writing.
Yeah.
And so I went just as a fan of the books and loved it so much. If you've never been, it's something that you should really see. It takes Southern literature and it wraps it in Southern hospitality. So it starts with a gala on Friday night. There are lectures all day Saturday. Walker Percy wrote this fabulous essay called Bourbon Neat, where he talked about the joys of the perfect bourbon drink sitting on your porch.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And so we have on Saturday afternoon an event that has become absolutely famous, where St. Francisville is a historic town full of old homes with beautiful porches.
Beautiful.
And so you actually travel from one porch to another on a progressive stroll, tasting a different bourbon drink and food at each stop.
That's a great idea.
It wraps up with a crawfish boil in the park at the end of it on Saturday night. And then on Sunday, people get together and talk about what they've heard, what they've learned. It's just a magnificent event. And that's now in its 5th year. So bookstore's only been here 2 years, so I really cannot take credit.
Sure. But how fortunate that you're able to
Yes.
piggyback on it and the synergies that it creates for your business.
Absolutely.
Well, let me switch gears for a minute from business ladies. This is a part of the show we call Another Great Idea. So maybe you've got a friend who's always got a great idea for you. They tell you about a job to apply for, that guy you should have a cup of coffee with, or a great investment opportunity you should jump on. And you maybe take this advice and it turns out to be a disaster, or you dismiss it and you miss out on a great opportunity. Maybe it turns out well for you. Can y'all think of a situation like this, and did you take the advice or not, and how did it turn out?
You know, it's interesting. When I was a college senior, I went to school at Vanderbilt in Nashville, and towards the beginning of the second semester of my senior year, I kind of looked up and thought, oh no, I have no idea what to do. It is time for me to find a job. And really was directionless, really was struggling with what to do, where to go. And I heard about this program from my then thesis advisor called Teach for America. I'd never heard of the program, and it was interesting because as I learned more, that became the one thing that I was really excited to do. You know, I applied to some other jobs and thought about some other avenues, but I found myself really dedicating all of my energy into this application for this new program I'd heard about called Teach for America. And that has been, you know, the path that has taken me in a totally different direction. With Teach for America, I moved to Washington, D.C. I taught amazing students at Anacostia High School. I taught high school special ed, which has led me to the passion that I have now for programs like the Greater Baton Rouge HOPE Academy, a client of mine now. So it really was the way that I got into education, that I came to learn the gross inequities in education and became such a passionate advocate for the work. So when I think about where my life could have gone had I not heard about that program from that particular professor on that particular day in class, it would be a very different experience.
That's fantastic. What about you, Missy?
Well, the best advice I ever took is actually rather a funny story. Back in 1997, I was working for, at the time, the National Flood Insurance Program, traveling a huge territory as their training rep for agents.
Okay.
And I would basically be gone all day and all week, get on a plane on Monday, get off on Thursday, do paperwork all day Friday, lay on my sofa and read books all weekend, get back on the plane Monday morning. Not a whole lot of a life. And so one day I was sitting with my girlfriends and I said, I think I'm going to get a part-time job on the weekends just to get me out of the house. And this girlfriend of mine, Christina Martinez, she wasn't Martinez then, I don't think. Maybe she was. I don't remember. But anyway, she was at the time working at this little-known thing out at UNO. They had brought in this baseball team, and they were building a stadium, and there was the thought that they were going to be able to open a great big stadium and have a minor league baseball team in New Orleans.
Okay, I remember that.
Yeah, and she
I
said,
was there.
why don't you come? We need suite attendants when we get ready to open in a couple of weeks. You can do that. I said, oh, I'm really not good at serving people. and she said, oh, no, you do it. And my other friend, Michelle, was there, and Michelle had restaurant experience, and she said, come on, I'll do it if you do it. So I did. And because my friend Michelle had a restaurant experience, they assigned us to the owner's suite for opening night.
Right.
Yeah. And so, you know, here I am, the girl who does not like to serve people. And this guy says to me the first night, first thing on this advice that I took that I did not want to take, he says, where do I get a drink around here? And I said, oh, I'll be happy to get that for you, sir. Would you like a soft drink or a beer? And he said, no, I want a real drink. And I said, well, I'm sorry, sir. This is a baseball stadium. We serve soft drinks and beer. And he said, I want to see your boss. And I'm like, okay, great.
Already in trouble.
So right, here I am, first day on the job I didn't want to take, and now I'm fired. So I go get the head of catering, and I bring him in, and the first thing he says is, oh my goodness, Mr. Couhig. What can I do for you? And I'm still going, who is this guy? And so apparently this guy owned the baseball team.
Right, of course.
And he said, why can't I get a drink here? And Luis at the time said, well, you didn't ask for a bar on the suite level. And he said, I don't want a bar on the suite level. I want a bar for the whole stadium.
Wow.
And Luis said, oh, I'm sorry, we just don't have it set up. You know, we can get this done in a few weeks. And he said, no. And he takes out a napkin and he starts writing things down and get these things for me tomorrow. We're opening a bar in the concourse. And Louise says, well, we don't have bartenders. And he said, these 2 girls will do. And I said, whoa. I don't know how to make a drink for this. Right. I didn't want a job in the first place. I don't know how to make a drink. And he said, what's in a Jack and Coke, Blondie?
Blondie.
Oh.
I got the answer right, and today we're married. So it was the best advice I've ever taken.
That's a great story.
That is so funny.
Still making him drinks?
The funny thing is he doesn't even drink Jack and Coke. But he hates Coke.
But just tell me he doesn't boss you around.
No, absolutely
Okay.
not. And he doesn't call me Blondie anymore either.
All right.
Cut that off pretty quick.
Yeah.
Fair.
Ashley, you mentioned Teach for America, and I was glad you did, because there are so many young community leaders in Baton Rouge that came from there, such as yourself and Sarah Broom and Michael Tipton. And it's been such a much lauded organization, but it has come under fire from some critics for being, very elite. And as you alluded to, kids in inner city schools sometimes don't see adults that look like them, when they need to see role model teachers. Do you think that criticism is warranted? And as you've stepped away from Teach for America now, what do you see? Is that a
Sure.
legitimate criticism?
Yeah, I really like that people ask that question because I think Teach for America has done a lot. One thing I would say about Teach for America that has been true in my experience as a staff member and in my experience as an alum is it is an incredibly reflective organization. So it's an organization that relishes feedback, positive and certainly negative. And I think that this is feedback that it has received and taken to heart. And so while I don't know the numbers, I do know that the core has become significantly more diverse, that the organization has put significant resources in ensuring that that is the case. So you see a lot more efforts around recruiting students from the communities that they're then going to serve, so recruiting folks that are local, and you see a lot more efforts in recruiting folks that are people of color from low-income communities, really trying to diversify the core, because I think that you're right. I think that there is this belief and understanding of Teach for America as previously as sort of a elitist organization. And I think that there's some truth to that in the past. I really do. And so I've been really happy to see the organization dedicate so much time and energy and, frankly, financial resources in diversifying its core.
That's great. Louisiana gets a bad rap for being so illiterate, and yet, Missy, as you mentioned, or having such low educational attainment. But as you mentioned, there is this thriving literary community here, and I think because our culture is so rich, our artistic community and people around the world know about Walker Percy and Tennessee Williams and, some of the other great Southern writers. Of course, what do you make of that dichotomy? What is it? Is it the inherent conditions here and the inequality that make it so rich for the great writers? I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting question. And one of the other literary festivals I work with now, this is my first year chairing that festival, is the Writers and Readers Symposium that takes place in February. And one of the writers who's speaking this year is Ernest Gaines.
Okay, another great one.
Ernest Gaines, of course, is an amazing Southern writer from New Roads, Point Coupé area, but actually, when he started writing, had moved to California and then actually became, a professor in college there and started writing there, and then came back here, though, because this is home. And this is, if you look, every one of his books is set here, though he lived that important part of his life there. So, and I think we find that a lot in Southern literature, is that even if the people move away, the heart stays here. This is such a community, such a place that has so much feeling. And when you're looking for inspiration and you're looking for a story, you just don't find them better than you do in the
That's
South.
right. That's absolutely right.
This is very, very true. How do you all market your respective businesses?
Mine's all word of mouth.
Is it?
Yeah. And this is the wonderful thing about Baton Rouge, right? We have a small, deeply connected community. And so I've been blessed, but some work has just inevitably led to more work, and that makes me really happy. I really haven't done any marketing. I was convinced to do a Facebook profile recently. So I felt pretty proud of that. But beyond that, it's been
Not
word of
even
mouth.
social media, though, just word of mouth.
That's correct.
Fantastic.
I'm going to come from the opposite standpoint.
If you can help me.
Right. So because my entire background is in marketing and sales, I think I got off to a running start. Like I said, the bookstore is only 2 years old, but we've already been named one of the 10 best bookstores in the state of Louisiana. We head up these festivals. We have authors come in from around the country. And I think a lot of that is because I'm not afraid to tell you what's going on. And so I'm very active on social media. We do an Instagram and a Facebook post nearly every day. I write a blog that Tales from a Bookshop, because one of the things I found was that when I started saying, oh, I've always dreamed of opening a bookstore, so many other people say, oh,
I do too.
exactly. And, people who are never going to open a bookstore but want to live vicariously through, oh my God, you're opening a bookstore. And so I started writing a blog about opening a bookstore and what happens on a daily basis and the funny stories that happen. And it's really taken off, strangely enough. And so I do that with a newsletter and talk to anyone who will listen about what we're doing.
How important is a network of independent booksellers? I mean, I know they have those organizations, but there's only like one independent bookstore here in Baton Rouge. I know there are a couple in New Orleans.
It is such an amazingly supportive community. I just got back from the American Booksellers Association meeting that was last week in Nashville, where almost 700 independent booksellers came together to learn from each other, to share with each other. When we first decided we were going to open this bookstore, we went to the bookstores that we spent most of our time in, which at the time was in New Orleans, and that's at Octavia Books and Garden District Books. And, Britton at Garden District Books particularly, the first thing he said to me was, I said, but I don't even know where to buy a book. And he said, call this company called Paws & Associates out of Florida. They'll teach you. Did you know there was actually a book on how to open a bookstore and a class offered on how to open a bookstore?
Sign me up.
I know, so I had no idea. And so I got the book and I sat there on my little courtyard in New Orleans and with sticky notes, and I figured out, and every time I had a question, I go to those guys still to this day, and I say, so I'm thinking of doing this, what do you think? And they're so incredibly supportive, and you find that in bookstores. One of the reasons that we decided to open a bookstore is because when we travel, we go to independent bookstores. And since opening the bookstore, we've done it even more, and now we go in and say, we've just opened a bookstore, what's the best thing you've done and the worst thing you've done? And people from around the country want to share, want to help you, and they want you to be a success.
Well, Missy Couhig and Ashley Hurd, you ladies are doing so much to elevate the conversation and the level of educational attainment here in our community. And I know it's not easy, but keep up the good work. I appreciate y'all taking the time to be with me today on Out to Lunch.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Absolutely. It's a joy.
My guests today on Out to Lunch have been Ashley Hurd of Ashley Hurd Consulting and Missy Couhig of the Conundrum. The producer of our show is Grant Morris. Our technical producer is Eric Merle. Our associate producer is Peter Raschuti. And our Baton Rouge business consultants are Charlie D'Agostino and Ann Edelman. You can see photos from this show on itsbatonrouge.la and on our It's Baton Rouge Facebook page. You can hear this show and past episodes of Out to Lunch wherever you get podcasts and at itsbatonrouge.la. Out to Lunch is a production of INO Broadcasting for itsbatonrouge.la and WRKF 89.3 FM. I'm Stephanie Riegel. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to meeting you again next week around the table here at Mansurs for more business Baton Rouge style on Out to Lunch.
Out to Lunch is recorded live over lunch at Mansurs on the Boulevard in Baton Rouge. Mansurs is open for lunch daily from 11 to 2, for dinner nightly, and for brunch on Saturdays and Sundays. Mitchell Foreman wrote and performs all the music on Out to Lunch. Mitchell's music is available wherever great jazz is sold or streamed, and at mitchellforeman.com. Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys and offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Business First Bank, with locations throughout the state, including 11 offices in the Baton Rouge area, providing personal and commercial banking, treasury management, and wealth solution services to help clients succeed. Business First Bank, banking with greater momentum. And by Shewart & Associates, legal recruiters in Louisiana and Texas.